All right. I still love that music every time I hear it. Welcome, everybody, to an Ask Me Anything with Sportico and Sports Innovation Lab. I am not joined by Scott this week. I'm actually joined by Eben Novi-Williams, sports business reporter at Sportico. Eben, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Pinch hitting today.
Good to see you. I'd make all kinds of bad jokes about the shoes you need to fill, but I think we'll focus on our guest instead. Our guest is Lawrence Epstein, the COO of the UFC. Lawrence, we've known each other for a while. I know that you and Eben have talked a bunch. It is a real pleasure for you to be joining us here today, and we've got a lot to get into because you guys have some really big news breaking today. But I want to just start by saying welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's not bury the lead. It's right there in the chat. You guys have some really big news today. Our guests are here, and they're listening to not only the questions that Eben and I are going to ask you, but they have the opportunity to, as the title suggests, ask you anything. So if you guys are here and you want to ask a question about the news that Lawrence is about to talk about, or any of the questions that I ask or Evan asks, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A. If you throw them in the chat, I might see them, but very likely I will see them if you throw them in the Q&A. So with all of that said, all the logistics out of the way, Lawrence, tell us what happened today. You guys have some really big news.
Yeah, we're really excited to announce the actually extension of our existing partnership with DraftKings. We've been partners with DraftKings for a while now, back in the daily fantasy days, and of course over 2020 we had a great year together, but we've entered into a new 5-year deal. This is certainly one of the biggest deals that we've ever done in the history of the UFC, and it's exciting for us really for 3 reasons. One, of course, every partnership like this involves money, but really it's the second 2 things that we're really most excited about. The number 2 piece is that we love partnering with brands that are best in class, and clearly DraftKings is best in class. They're the leading sports book in the United States. They're the leading daily fantasy group in the United States. So love partnering with best-in-class brands. And then, of course, number 3, which is really the most important to us, is how do these partnerships create activation opportunities to engage our existing fan base, to get them more involved in UFC, and also to attract new members to the UFC fandom. And a deal like this is transformative. This is the biggest opportunity, frankly, that we've got right now, along with our partnership with EA, to bring in new people to the UFC ecosystem. And that's a central tenet of this deal, and we're just incredibly excited to be partners with DraftKings for the next 5 years.
So give our audience a little bit of what they can't see if they read those public articles. How did this come about? Was it just your existing relationship was coming to the end and you guys had to reimagine what it was going to look like going forward? Or was there some other impetus for you guys sitting down at the table and looking at something much bigger?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the existing relationship was part of the story, but I think another big piece of this is just our interest in the UFC in getting more and more involved in the sports gaming world. We're from Vegas, so it's sort of in our DNA a little bit, sports gambling, but we also know how important it is to engaging fans and bringing in new fans. And so we've always been forward thinking when it comes to getting involved in sports gaming with our brand. We also feel like, in the early days, it was key to creating legitimacy for the UFC. If you're going to bet on it, it's got to be real. And so I think, it's something that goes way back. It's part of our DNA. We're believers in it with respect to what it does for the value and the interest fans have in our content. And so this is just, it's another sort of moment in this journey that we've had. But, we've always been, really putting that foot forward when it comes to combining the UFC and sports gambling.
And Evan, you were one of the reporters who broke this story. What struck you about this deal, and what would you like to dig deeper into?
Yeah, one of the things that interests me here, we've seen kind of 2 different models for sports teams and sports leagues when they do sports betting deals. There are teams and leagues like the NBA, for example, that want to sign as many multiple partners as possible. And then, Lawrence, you guys, UFC, went a different route. You signed one single exclusive partnership. I know there was an RFP out for this. How did you think about whether you wanted one partner that was going to be paying a lot of money and really to work together, as opposed to maybe we get 5 or 6 books in here and we make is the sum bigger than the whole of its parts?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely part of the thought process. I mean, clearly we want to make sure that all of the sports betting platforms in the United States and frankly around the world are taking action on UFC. And so that, this is not exclusive in that sense. But, you hit the nail on the head. We just sort of felt like if we picked one partner that we could really work with over a long period of time in this particular market here in the United States and Canada, and figure out a way to maximize the exposure opportunities. I mean, as you reported, I mean, you know, the amount of money that DraftKings can expend exposing the UFC athletes, exposing the UFC brand, exposing the UFC events to the world is massive. It's the biggest part of this deal, frankly, and that was really key to us, you know, going exclusive with one company. There's a lot of great companies out there in this space, but we're really happy to be partnered with what we think is really the market leader here in the U.S., which is DraftKings.
When you think about adding new fans, I would imagine the biggest hurdle is just getting them to set their eyeballs on a live fight as it is. Betting seems like a really easy way to do that. If they have action on it, they may be willing to wager on it. What are the other ways? The ESPN deal, I'm sure, helps, but what are the ways that you think about how do we get people out there to watch their first fight?
Yeah, you know, ESPN, of course, has just been an incredible partner. I mean, the evolution of the UFC is sort of see these milestones. You know, of course, when we first got a TV deal with Fight TV, and then we transitioned, of course, to Fox, where we had an incredible relationship with the guys at Fox Sports. But, you know, the reality is ESPN's taking us to the next level, and it's not just in reach. I mean, I think the obvious thing is, oh, there's more eyeballs, you know, watching ESPN, and that's going to, of course, expand your fan base. Yes, that's part of the deal. But the support that we get from the digital ecosystem, from the earned media, and of course, being part of this launch of ESPN Plus was just transformative. I mean, the amount of effort that the Walt Disney Company put behind ESPN Plus, and of course, UFC being the, you know, some of the best content that's on that platform, you know, we got a lot of that promotion. So that was really important to us, you know, and that continues to be really important to us as a vehicle to attract new fans. I think another thing that was huge for us, of course, is, you know, getting back to business before everybody else. You know, UFC President Dana White, you know, he's our fearless leader, and he's challenged us and said, we got to be first. Yes, we've got to do it in a safe manner and in a manner that's respectful of our athletes and our employees and our third-party contractors, to make sure that we're not doing anything that is not safe. But, you know, the fact that we were able to get back first, we had a good stable of events before anybody really, you know, got going. You know, that attracted a ton of new fans, and they stuck with us. You know, we believe in our product. We think we've got a great product. We think the only thing we've got to do is expose people to it. And if they see it, for the most part, they're going to like it, and they're going to, you know, they're going to continue to engage with us. And I think, you know, that's something that was also key to acquiring these new fans. But, you know, one other thing I want to mention, because the health and safety stuff is so important to us. We were first, and we were proud of being first. But we're also incredibly proud of how we've done it from a safety standpoint. And just to give you guys a little perspective, you know, since we got back up and running with those first series of events in Jacksonville, Florida, then we went to, of course, Vegas at the Apex facility in Abu Dhabi. We've done about 13,500 tests. Rate of positivity, about last time I saw it, because I keep tabs on this thing pretty closely, it's about 0.85%. So less than 1% rate of positivity. It is the leading, rate of positivity in the industry, the lowest rate of positivity in the industry. You know, the NBA and others have talked about being at 7 or 8% and being happy. That was well below sort of national averages. So we're really proud of what we were able to do being first. We're even more proud of what we were able to do from a safety standpoint. And just a testament to our employees, our athletes, our third-party contractors. We had a great plan. Everybody stuck to it. And I said the proof's in that rate of positivity, which is less than 1%.
Yeah, I think you guys get a tremendous amount of credit for that, at least in the inner circles of people that have been trying to mitigate the risk when launching or relaunching their sports properties. What do you think it was, besides the dedication of your team and all those soft things that, you know, really do lead to the culture that you've built? What technology did you do? What protocols did you put in place? How did you guys really manage this from we got to change some things about how we operate our battles?
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things that is just different for us than any other sport is that we actually live with regulatory oversight every single day. So anytime we do an event, it's under the auspices of the Nevada Athletic Commission, the New York Athletic Commission, federations and commissions around the world. They're looking and supervising what we do. And this is a legacy of the boxing, industry. There's been regulation of combat sports for a long time. So we sort of had that mindset, like we're used to dealing with somebody looking and scrutinizing as to how we're operating our business. And the other thing that's great about it is those regulators are partners. I mean, we see them as partners. And so the first step, once we had put together, our 25 to 35 page sort of health, safety, and operations manual was to go to the Nevada Athletic Commission, the Florida Athletic Commission, and federations and commissions around the world and said, hey, we want to get back in action. We want to do it safely. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? Tell us what you think of this plan. We got a ton of amazing, great, critical feedback. This needs to be tightened. This needs to be expanded. Have you thought about this? All that information was incorporated into our plan. And, I give a ton of credit to the regulators out there for that rate of positivity too. They scrutinized our plans. They gave us a lot of constructive criticism that all got incorporated into the plan. And that stuff, continues to this day. As you look at new technologies for testing, as you look at new protocols, these athletic commissions are just great partners. So that was really a big part of why I think we were so successful. And it was just sort of a legacy of the regulatory environment that we live in here in the United States and frankly around the world.
Lawrence, one of the things I've loved hearing from sports executives, looking back on March, April, and May, is the brainstorming sessions that were happening about, hey, what can we do to get back up and running? What are some ideas? There was you guys at one point were thinking about a tribal land fight that didn't actually happen. You were in Jacksonville, you're back in Vegas. Were there other ideas, anything you can share about, off the wall thoughts that you guys had about, oh, maybe we can do X or Y in Z place that can maybe get us back up and running faster?
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Tachi Palace situation. First, we got a lot of grief about that, ended up pulling it off. And then at the last second, our partners didn't think it was the right thing to do. But you know what? It was an incredible exercise because we sort of went through, and stress tested our entire organization, developed this plan, tried to figure out ways to do it. It didn't obviously happen, but we took all those learnings, we refined it, we modified our game plan, and then ultimately we're able to do that event in Jacksonville, Florida, that series of events in Jacksonville, Florida. But, listen, Dana the guy's a force of nature. He's got more ideas than, any sports executive I've certainly ever met. Some of them were crazy. And this Fight Island thing, was this crazy idea that turned into literally one of the best ideas we've ever had in the history of our company. But it literally started out, Dana was like, I want to buy an island. And he was saying, let's buy an island and let's put these events on this island. That's the way it started out. And, we had some crazy discussions about it. But as we thought through it, and then all of a sudden we reconnected with our partners in Abu Dhabi and said, wait a second, we've got some islands that actually have some infrastructure on them. This whole thing sort of pivoted towards that. But from this crazy idea of literally, I'm going to buy an island and we're going to put an event on an island, it turned into the series of events in Abu Dhabi that obviously were successful events that were broadcast around the world. The McGregor Poirier event being the biggest event we've ever done. They were incredibly successful, but even more important than that, we have developed a brand now that is part of the UFC, ecosystem, the Fight Island brand. And this is something that is, we've already had 3 iterations of it. And this is going to be something you're going to see, as far as I can see for a long time, maybe forever, as part of the UFC. So it started with a crazy idea. I wish we would have had video cameras taping all these crazy things that Dana was inspiring us with, but ultimately it turned into this just incredible, brand that now is part of the permanent landscape of the UFC.
I feel like Dana's going to be pushing to fight on the moon at some point soon.
Yeah.
And
I was just going to say, in the wake of that, we've seen more sports-related SPACs launched than anything, and Sportico has been covering them. So it made the Fight Island thing seem like not that bad of an idea. Because so here, Lawrence, this isn't Ask Me Anything. So we're going to see how agile you are on your feet. I want to ask a question that Atha is asking. It deals with sponsorship and partnerships and some of your commercial deals. The question is, why do fighters rush to wear a Reebok t-shirt right after the fight is over and when they're announcing the results and things like that? Is there a component to their partnership, their relationship with you guys that requires fighters to do that, or is that by their own volition and their own individual sponsorship?
Yeah, so a little bit of history on this one. For those fans of the UFC that have been watching a long time, you remember, 6 or so years ago, when we had what I would call sort of a free-for-all when it comes to what athletes look like when they came into the octagon. All different sorts of equipment, all different sorts of sponsors on the athletes' trunks, T-shirts, flags, all sorts of stuff. Frankly, when we were talking to ESPN early on before we did the Fox deal, well, after we were after the Fox deal was sort of expiring, we were talking to them about the possibility of working together. I mean, one of the things that ESPN gave us feedback on is like, listen, your product looks junky. It doesn't look like, all the other professional sports that we cover, and there's also a differentiation issue. Like, you can't really tell. Is that UFC? Is it Bellator? Is it, one of the other competitors? So, we sort of took that to heart and tried to sort of clean up the landscape. And that was one of the reasons behind the Reebok deal. The Reebok deal created a consistent look. And I think, even though this Reebok deal is coming to an end, it was really transformative for the UFC, not just because it made our content look cleaner and better and more distinctive, but also because Reebok did an incredible job building first-class product designed for the mixed martial arts game. This wasn't a product that was like a running short that they just slapped a UFC logo on. The guys at Reebok did, an incredible job designing product that was created just for our athletes. And, it's been, I think that's been one of the best parts of that relationship. But as part of the overall deal, for fight-related events, and that would be, sort of the lead up to the events, fight week, and of course post-fight events, in addition to, of course, the events themselves, the athletes are required to wear the Reebok gear. Now, there's a couple of different things that happen with respect to the athletes. All athletes get a piece of the revenue that we get from Reebok. In fact, as we've talked about previously, all of the revenue essentially goes to the athletes. This is not, sort of a money-making enterprise for the UFC. And athletes get a certain fee based upon, first of all, if they're champions, of course, they're getting, the highest level fee, but also based upon the number of fights that they've participated in the UFC. So the longer you've been in the UFC, the higher your athlete outfitting policy payment is going to be. In addition to that, Reebok sponsored a ton of our athletes, over the years. And so there were additional relationships that were direct between Reebok and the individual athletes. So, that's sort of the history of that. We're really excited this year to be transitioning to a new athlete provider, which is a company called Venom. Long history in the MMA space. As I said, once again, we're really excited about a company that is building products specifically for the mixed martial arts athlete. This is not a logo slap of a basketball short or something else. This is a product that's specific to our sport, which there's a lot of nuance to it. And we could spend a couple hours talking about the details of this product and why it's perfect for our athletes. So, that's sort of the answer to that question.
How does the Venom deal, obviously a much smaller company than Reebok and one that's a bit more endemic to the sport, how does it change under them? Is there more creativity allowed for athletes? I know that was one of the sticking points around Reebok. Athletes felt like they wanted kind of more artistic say in what was on their bodies during fights. What's going to be different with Venom than Reebok?
Yeah, the good news is Venom is a company that has a long history of working with their athletes, a ton of them. And, you see a lot of athletes, wearing Venom product when they're training, when they're doing sort of things outside the UFC. So they've got tremendous credibility, lots of relationships. The creativity with the athletes is key. And it's something that, when we talk to Venom and as we sort of manage this overall relationship, the athletes' concerns and ideas and thoughts are a big part of this thing. So there's no doubt there will be a space for that. But we're really, really excited about this deal. As I said, it's not going to, it's financially, it's just as good and probably will be better for the athletes than the Reebok deal was. And ultimately, this is a high quality product with a great company that really focused on mixed martial arts. So we couldn't be more excited about starting this partnership with Venom.
So a good transition from here is that, we're touching on sort of a traditional sports business model, right? Equipment deal, an apparel deal, naming rights, entitlements, those types of things. You guys have also been at the forefront of technology, and Scott asked this question kindly in the Q&A, so I'll give him credit for probing us in this direction. But you because you participate in our leadership board, have always been very outspoken about how you collect data in a privacy compliant way, but really thinking about sort of what your fans are doing. You have your own OTT channel. You just touched on DraftKings as an acquisition strategy and a digital platform to do some more of this stuff. What do you do as a COO to really build a culture of learning more about your fans, learning more about their digital behaviors and their preferences? Where do you look within your organization to really infuse that sort of mindset?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is sort of continuing on, the leadership that we've had over the years, and this desire to be sort of, first in all spaces. So we have 8 brand maxims here at the UFC, and one of them is in a lot of ways, whether it's, paying women, female athletes the exact same way we paid men from day one, or whether it's our drug testing policy, or a bunch of other things I could talk about. But one of them is being, forward thinking and trying to be first when it comes to technology, whether that is social media related relationships, whether it's how we analyze our fan base. I mean, just to give you an example, we do for every single pay-per-view event an extensive focus group to, get our fans. When I say our fans, segmented types of fans, the hardcore fans, the sort of the casual fan, the person that only comes in for the, the big mega events. We've got our fan base sort of segmented into 7 or 8 different groups. And we survey that group and ask them questions about what fights they're excited to see, what marketing themes connect with them. And so that's sort of the beginning of that process as to how we even put together events. We sort of, we listen to what our fans in all different segments think about upcoming events, and that helps us guide marketing and matchmaking and a whole bunch of other stuff.
You said you said you've been first in a bunch of areas, and one of the areas that you mentioned was your support for women fighters in this sport, elevating their role. You're also a strong advocate and supporter of the Fan Project, the initiative that Sports Innovation Lab is running right now to collect first-party data from fans to prove what the demand or the behaviors are like for people who lean into women's sports, right? And I'm sure in your data, you've seen the way that your fans respond differently to female fights than male fights. I'm sure that your distribution probably varies on when you have those fights and your cards. Can you talk a little bit about the role of not only treating those fighters equally as the male fighters, but the strategy for really putting the women aspect of MMA on a pedestal and continuing to grow it? You have now your first female champion, Zhang Wei Li in China. That has got to be a role model for fans in this space that love watching this sport.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. And first of all, we're really proud to be supporting the Fan Project and our partnership. With Sports Innovation Lab, it's been transformative to us in so many different ways. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the whole advent of female fighters in the UFC is not something that frankly. Dana and all of us sort of really saw it coming. We ended up entering into a relationship with Ronda Rousey. We saw her fight and we're like, wait a second, there's something different here. There's something special here. And so I think that's sort of what opened our eyes to, this can be a huge part of our business. And, it truly was transformative. We see a ton of different, sort of fans engaging with our product when we've got, females on the main card, or we have female championship fights. We see, different groups of fans coming in, different activities with respect to how those fans engage with their product, whether it's on social media, whether it's, how they buy, the events themselves. And, it's really, really interesting. But, Ronda Rousey really transformed our mindset, and frankly, not just the mixed martial arts landscape, but I think the world of sport. Listen, for a long time, she was our highest paid athlete. She made more money than anybody in the organization because she deserved it, number one. But number two, because, she brought this massive, new fan base, which is she brought a ton of women, young women into the UFC ecosystem. And the great thing is that we've been able to hold on to them with so many interesting, new athletes. You mentioned Zhang Wei Li, who's just, exploding as an athlete in China, but also has a great following here in the United States. And it's truly been transformative to the UFC to add and to enhance the female fandom.
This may be an impossible question, but can you break down your business by revenue brought in from male fights and female fights? And secondly, when you think about the growth trajectory of both those buckets, kind of where do you think about the male versus the female portions of your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's very much, geography dependent. In the United States, I could tell you a story that's very different than what I could tell you in for example, the Middle East. Even in a market like Brazil, which is a mature market, there's still a lot of growth in that female market. So
where's the female market most robust? Is it here in the US?
Here in certainly in North America, US and Canada. definitely the most robust. I would say, Brazil is number 2 probably, but it's different. There's different cultural differences. There's different, sort of affinities for female athletes in different markets. But in general, it is one of our fastest growing sort of demos, and it continues to be. And we're going to continue to invest in it. We're continuing to sign more and more female athletes, and this is something that's obviously a priority, but it's a huge growth engine for us, still in the United States, but in particular around the world.
As we're talking here about different regions of the world, question just came in from Earl about Africa. I know you guys have fought there before. Give us a sense of kind of what your thoughts are on that region of the world.
It's really the only region where we haven't really been able to do events. We've done events in the Middle East. We've certainly got tremendous amount of African athletes. You got guys like Kamaru Usman. You've got, there's a champion, of course. You've got athletes from really all over Africa. We've been looking at the possibility of events pre-COVID, of course, in South Africa. Nigeria is a great market for us, huge market for us. Francis Ngannou's from Cameroon, so that's another market we'd love to figure out how we can do that. That's definitely on our radar. The good news is that infrastructure is getting better. The NBA has done some great stuff with the African Basketball League that I think is creating better arenas and better facilities, and so and all the technology that you need to put on these events. So it's definitely on our list. It's definitely a priority. We have a ton of fans there, and I'm not saying it's going to be 2022, but I think 2023 and beyond, you will see us do an event in Africa. At least that's one of my priorities for sure.
That from working with us and looking at our research, that revenue diversification is a big deal for a lot of the different areas that we focus on when we look at professional sports. You guys have been very good about revenue diversification, in your OTT. I went through a few of these things, but you also have your training facilities, right? You have a bunch of different other models that allow you to, when the fights aren't happening, continue to generate revenue from your fan base. What types of things are on your roadmap going forward that fans can look forward to in terms of like new products, new services that the UFC might be launching?
Yeah, so just a little history on that. Revenue diversification. We were probably the least diverse, from a revenue standpoint, business in the world of sports at one time, and we essentially derived all of our revenue from pay-per-view. So we are proud of being able to sort of create models like the one we have with ESPN, where we've got a broadcast relationship, we've still got a pay-per-view relationship, we've got an OTT relationship. The advent of Fight Pass platform around the world has also been another important revenue diversification. So we've come a long way for sure. When it comes to innovations, 2 points there. One, it's incredibly important what we're doing in between events. There's so much competition out there. There's so much competing for the attention. Forget about the wallet. I'm more concerned about attention of the consumer because there's just so much going on. Yes, you've got to compete for wallet share, but attention seems to be the more difficult thing. So keeping up interest in between events is a priority for us, and I think we've done a pretty good job with that, with a variety of different pieces of content and other things that we're doing. I can tell you, I think some of our athletes have done an incredible job. You got an athlete like Conor McGregor with 50 or 60 or I don't even know 70 million followers on social media. Yes, there's a lot of interest in leading up to his fights, but frankly, there's just as much interest in between those fights. And he keeps his fan base engaged, whether it's him doing training or him talking about.
He has clever ways of making headlines. Yes, he does for sure.
So that's stuff you have to do. As far as innovations, stuff that are on our radar. Just to pivot back a bit to the gambling discussion we had previously. One of the priorities that we have as an organization is to really figure out how to create real-time automatic data capture for our events. And we've been able to do it in a couple of different areas, but this is something that I think in the next couple of years we're hopefully going to roll out here at the UFC, where you're going to have this automated data feed that, yes, is going to make gambling more interesting, certainly in-round type of gambling, which is not really available right now. You can bet, of course, on the outcome of the fight, and then some books are offering sort of in-between round betting, but nobody's really offering this sort of in-round betting. I think that'll be. And
since we're on the topic of betting, what are the odds that this is a wearable versus a camera-based system?
It's a great question. We're certainly looking at both opportunities. If I'm a betting man, so we're talking about gaming, I think the camera-based strategy is out ahead right now. But we're looking at a variety of different collaborations with companies, frankly, around the world and locally here in Las Vegas that I think is going to get us there. And it may be a combination. It may be a combination of both. It just sort of depends. But that's an area that I think, not just in the gambling space, but I think from a content standpoint, it's going to make the content more interesting. And we got a lot of people that enjoy our EA video game, and so this combination or this sort of connection between the virtual world and sort of the real world gets closer every day. And I think adding that type of data, adding that type of information to the live event sort of brings that a little bit closer. You have the sort of a similar type experience that you have when you're playing our EA UFC game, and I think that's going to be interesting, particular to a younger demographic. Interesting to a lot of our fans, and going to be an attractor for some fans that haven't experienced UFC events just yet.
What about original content, Lawrence? I think you guys have done a really good job already. There's a video that I use a lot as an example of a great piece of original content from one of the Cormier Jones fights. Yeah. When Dan Cormier is training and Dana comes in and tells him John tested positive, the fight's off, and Dan essentially breaks into tears on the spot. It's a very real piece of footage, and it's very humanizing. Talk us through kind of what the original content piece is, because those are things that you can do midweek. Those can fill in the gaps between fights as well.
And just to jump in real quick too, because Mark has a question that's very relevant to this. Mark asks, again, on the content thing, it's what did you learn through your partnership with Samsung in creating VR-friendly content? So really touching on what Eben just said, but also maybe you could talk about the immersive media strategy as well.
Yeah, and I'll make a little note here on VR and AR too, but just go back to Evan's question. I mean, it's one of the things that we're most proud of, frankly, is the core expertise that we've developed in producing events, but also in developing, these other types of shoulder programming or other types of shows that either promote events or sort of look back at seminal moments in the history of the UFC. Our Fight Pass platform has given us some incredible insights. Over the years, we've been successful in getting people to buy pay-per-views, for example, or to watch Fox or ESPN, but we don't know who those people are. We get generalized data about numbers of people that are watching, but we don't have that granular information about what people are really interested in. And of course, we get that with our Fight Pass platform. And we can see, of course, as expected, the most watched stuff are live UFC events. But right there are some of these content pieces that we've created, whether it's the fight flashbacks, whether it's, some of the UFC, original pieces that we put together about, all the crazy things that have happened in the UFC in the past. And so, that original content is an incredibly important part of our Fight Pass strategy, but it's also, as you indicate, a way to keep people engaged, in between fights. And it's something that, you're going to see a lot more of. It's an essential part of the Fight Pass platform. It's also an important part of the stuff that we're delivering to ESPN and broadcasters around the world. And you're certainly going to see a lot more of that. Pivoting to VR and AR, we've always felt that this is something that should work incredibly well for our product. Because, it's when you watch a soccer game or you watch a football match, it's a big field. And, how does it actually work? With watching, 11 players against each other. What's so cool about the UFC and VR, for example, is that, you can position yourself sort of right there, right next to those people that are participating in a UFC event. So we've always felt there was, great opportunities there. I think, the biggest thing that we learned is it's just not for everybody. And maybe the market isn't as big, or at least based upon current technology, isn't as big as we were certainly hoping. But, this is another area where, we've tried to be first. We've tried to, be first in that particular space, whether it's 4K or even now 8K. I don't know if you notice some of the new cameras that we have on the UFC events. It's so real. It's like you're at the event when you're watching on TV. It's absolutely amazing, the quality of these cameras now and the way they're able to depict, our events. It's transformative to the viewing experience. So anyway, we learned a lot from that. We sort of looked at some AR stuff too, which I think is interesting. keep pivoting back to sports gaming, but I think there's some really interesting stuff when you combine, AR and sports gaming, that if you can get these automated data feeds, you can do some really interesting stuff that I think could, really make the gambling viewing experience super interesting.
You mentioned Zhang Weili earlier. I want to go back to her for a second. The first Chinese-born male or female champion you've ever had. Is there a rough dollar figure you can put on how valuable that is? I mean, I've seen studies about Yao Ming, the first huge Chinese star in the NBA, and how valuable that was for China and its ambitions to grow the sport in China. How valuable is she as kind of the first real big champion ambassador you guys have in the world's biggest country?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's tough to put a specific dollar amount on that, but I mean, it's a big number. I mean, first of all, she is an awesome fighter. I mean, you're talking a little about content in between fights, and just watching, her train, whether it's on her social feed or some of the stuff that Dana's put out or stuff that we've put out on our social channels. I mean, it is just fun to watch her hit the pads. It's fun to watch her train. I mean, she is a badass. I mean, she is a really, really incredible athlete, really tough, and just seems to have cardio that just doesn't even seem, possible. It's just amazing. Listen, tough to put a price on it, but she's really starting to get momentum. Listen, Yao Ming is, he's the gold standard. He's what everybody aspires to. But we've seen some incredible trends with respect to Weili Zhang. I mean, last time I saw, she was 7 or 8 million followers on social. Really, really strong on some of the on Weibo and Douyin, the platforms, the Chinese platforms, and just growing really, really fast. This is somebody a couple years ago that nobody, even in China, knew about. And now we're talking about, those type of numbers on social. Listen, when you look at numbers in China, having 7 or 8 or 10 million followers on social, that's relatively small, but we're seeing some incredible growth rates that can show that she's going to be a big star. Listen, as long as she continues winning, she's going to do some great stuff. We're also looking at integrating her into a bunch of different content, and have to talk about our new deal with Migo. We had a very good partnership with PPTV for the last 5 or so years, but we transitioned to Migo. Migo, as I'm sure you know, owned by China Mobile. This is a rethinking, not just of our Chinese sort of media strategy, but media strategy in general. I mean, yes, there's going to be distribution of our events, and that's a central part of this deal. But there's also going to be a bunch of other things as part of this multi-year deal. We've got a fitness platform that we're going to be launching with them. We're going to be, collaborating on, just a ton of different content opportunities. And listen, China Mobile's got, almost 1 billion mobile phones out there. They've got a lot of customers. So there's a lot of great distribution opportunities with a platform like that Migu's got. So we're pretty excited about, what that's going to do for the UFC brand, but also what it's going to do just to increase the following of Weili Zhang and other Chinese athletes. And by the way, Weili is the champion. But, our UFC Performance Institute in Shanghai has been focused for the last couple of years on developing and fostering, new Chinese talent. And you're going to start seeing, you're already seeing, Song Yadong and a few, Leech is another big Chinese fighter. You're going to start to see a lot more of these Chinese athletes going up the ranks in the UFC. Just some incredible talent that's being generated out of that country. We had our first iteration of what we call the UFC Shanghai Combine, where we brought in, sort of 150 or 200 athletes, whittled it down to about 30. And then of that 30, we trained them and provided, a room and board for them and sort of tried to figure out who were going to be the best. We've got about a half a dozen or more of those athletes that have now formally entered the UFC. And we're going to do our second iteration of this combine and get ready for a lot more high quality Chinese athletes and a bunch of champions from China.
So I keep an eye on the clock because we don't like to punish our guests for more than 40 or 45 minutes here, Lawrence. So you're getting close to freedom. Before I wrap, I have one more theme, and then I'll let Evan hit his last questions. Venues. Big theme for the industry, from going from macro venues to micro venues, from going from macro venues to mixed use retail environments and things like that. UFC going to get into the venue space in a meaningful way with purpose-built venues, with immersive venues for some of this, high-end VR, AR content and betting centers. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of initially, and the whole world is changing when it comes to what is a quote venue. But one of the things that we saw in our business model was just not having necessarily these high fixed costs of owning an arena and all that goes along with that. It's been one of the things I think that's been, frankly, helpful to our business model. We're like the tech version of a sports business. We're asset light, we're nimble and quick, and we're able to I think run a business in a very efficient way. That being said, we've had a lot of success, and part of it was because of the craziness of COVID with the Apex facility, which really was envisioned as a space for us to produce. We have a full control room there, so we could produce all of our events out of that facility, wherever they were in the world, but also for things like Dana White's Contender Series and potentially hosting other events. We pivoted in the COVID era to host a bunch of our UFC events there. And, it's at least got us thinking about how, when the world sort of turns back to normal, are we going to continue to do a handful of events out of Apex? Because it's incredibly efficient. It's incredibly convenient. It's in a controlled environment. So, we're at least thinking about, now, operating our own type of a venue in that sense. But, you hit a good point. I think there's going to be necessarily, because fans want it and people want it, these other types of venues that are going to be, important to people interacting maybe in a different way with our brand and other brands. And I think we're certainly open to that type of stuff. But the mindset in the past has been, let's be asset light, let's be nimble and quick, and let's not get tied down with a bunch of fixed costs.
Looking back, is that $14 million you spent on Apex the best $14 million UFC ever spent?
It's certainly one of the best investments we made. I mean, that the credit for that one goes to Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel. There was a building across the street from us. We had about 35 acres here, and Ari happened to know the CEO of the business. He was moving that operation. They merged their businesses, and they weren't going to use that space anymore. And Ari's like, "You got to buy this. Let's build a production facility there. Let's do all this stuff." And we're like, "All right. I mean, yeah, I think it's a good idea." I mean, and of course, it was no one could have foreseen the COVID situation, but it's just an example of you make good investments. They tend to pay off, even in unintended sort of ways. And I don't know what we would have been able to do if we didn't have Apex. I mean, I'm sure we would have figured something out, but would not have been, I think, even close to the quality of the production that we've been able to put out to control the environment. That rate of positivity, that 8 or so % rate of positivity, a lot of that had to do with us doing all these events in a really tightly controlled environment at Apex. And so, for so many reasons, I'm so glad we made that investment, and I think you're right. As I talk about it, probably is the best money we ever spent.
So my last one for you, just to close out on venues. When you're not working on UFC, you're on the board of the new NFL stadium in Las Vegas. Will we see, and when will we see the first UFC's first U.S. stadium show in Las Vegas in the NFL venue?
Gosh, I hope so. I mean, been such a pleasure to be part of that process and to see, as a native Las Vegan, if you would ask me, any question and said, tell me what is absolutely impossible that will never happen in the history of Las Vegas, I would have said, number one, we'll never have an NFL team in Las Vegas. And thank God I was wrong about that. The Raiders are here, and this facility is just, it's world class. I think it's the best in the NFL. I think it's the best.
It's ridiculous. I've been watching Built from the Ground Up, just looking for you. I've been just looking for your cameo in that series. But the idea that the field comes out.
Yeah.
The field comes out.
Yeah, it's incredible. The thing that I think is so amazing about it is that it embodies the ethos of the Raiders. When you and it's like on the freeway too. So there's this pedestal. It's just this huge, silver and black, spaceship.
Yeah, they call it the sports car. It's so sick.
Yeah, it completely embodies the ethos of the Raiders. When you drive by that thing, you're like, that's where the Raiders live, and I got to go there. And so, I'm really hopeful that not only the Raiders get back there, but that the UFC does its first U.S. stadium show at the Allegiant Stadium here in Las Vegas. We'll see what happens with COVID. We'll see what happens with the right matchup. But I'm very optimistic that happens in hopefully the very near future.
All right. Well, Evan, I can't tolerate Scott chirping in my ear on the chat. Like he's not even here, and he's like chirping in all these questions. Do you have anything else you want to hit on with Lawrence before we let him run?
I feel like we could do this for hours, but I think we covered one of the big ones. Thanks, Lawrence.
All right. So Lawrence, what I like to do with all of our guests is to make sure you guys get the last word. So is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure you do before we say goodbye?
I think, I really think we covered it all. A great discussion. I just really appreciate you guys having me. It was fun.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, and I'll make sure that I mention to Scott's point here that the grass does slide out in Arizona too. Scott, good point. You guys, thank you all for joining us here today. Lawrence, thanks for your time again, and join us next month when we do this again with I'm not sure who our guest is yet, but it's going to be exciting to find out. You guys take care, stay safe. We'll see you soon.